Well, listen, Mar, it's a real pleasure to have you on. Thank you for making the time. I'm excited to chat with you.
Thank you, Brian.
So I want to start off about you a little bit. And I once heard that you wanted to be a professor. Is this right? When you were a kid, what was the thought process there?
I think when it runs in the family, that's when you want to be a professor. So my dad was a professor, and I used to go to his lectures in these big auditoriums in Barcelona. He was teaching pediatrics to fifth-year medical students. So I don't know. I always thought I would follow his steps and be a professor.
And you ended up becoming a professor at Stanford, which shout out to my brother who works at Stanford, and he's always giving me all this Stanford gear. So like people always think I go to Stanford because I have all these nice Nike gear from Stanford. But you also went on to become a startup founder and investor. So what happened? What made you kind of transition to the startup world? How did that happen?
Well, it was a crazy time. I actually, maybe I'll just rewind. I'm from Barcelona originally, and I came to Stanford for my PhD. I landed here in 1995. So that was a crazy time to be here because it was really the beginning of the .com. I remember everybody around us was starting .com companies. My PhD was in electrical engineering, and I was a circuit designer. So I was pretty much removed from the web in many ways. But by the time I defended my thesis in late 99, it was crazy here. It was really like, I think what you saw in crypto or you're seeing in AI, but 100x, if you can believe it, because people could touch it and understand it. Everybody could. So defended my thesis, and everybody around me was like, oh my gosh, you should take this software, put it on the web, and you should start a company. My software was software for designing analog circuits really efficiently. So we actually did that. I think we were one of the first web services, that was created, which was really innovative at the time. Like putting software on a browser was just crazy at the time. Nobody was going to do that. Although the real IP was, all the science behind how to model transistors, et cetera. So I had already committed to going to a school to be a professor, a really great university, which won't say. And at the last minute, peer pressure convinced me to say, okay, forget it. We're going to go start this company. And at the time I didn't know anything. I was really clueless regarding startups, completely clueless. So clueless that my advisor and we said, how do you start a company? We're like, I don't know. Let's go to the GSB, which is the Stanford Business School, and hire somebody. Nobody wanted to work with us. So we said, well, let's go buy a book. So we went to the Stanford bookstore and, bought some book. And anyways, it was really not the way people start companies today, I would say.
And you ended up starting a couple companies, right? So I'm sure the first company you started a certain way, but there's nothing like the school of hard knocks, right? Where you go out and you learn and you're in execution mode, and that's when you're stretched and you kind of take those lessons. So what were the main kind of successes and your main failures on the journey?
Yeah. I always think of my first company almost as my MBA. That company did not work out. But it was really where I learned all my lessons that I still use today to work with my companies. At the time, the world has changed a lot. But at the time, when you started a company, especially if you were a PhD student and a woman, the number one thing you would do is bring in a CEO. I mean, I think that's foreign completely today. You would not ever invest in a founder and say, well, let's start a CEO hire the next day. And that's exactly what the way companies were run. It was not the norm, right? So I ran the company for a year and a half until we found somebody, and then we brought in an external CEO. And at the time I was really young. So one of my biggest lessons there was you really have to trust your gut. It's I think even in a company, age and experience, obviously are a factor, but they don't determine the success of the company or the person that leads it. So I think trusting my gut and it was something that it actually plays off today when I do an investment. You can write a memo, be very rational about it, and then you can have a gut that tells you I shouldn't do it or I should do it, despite everything that I put in there. Anyways, so that's that.
How are you mentoring like young founders that start out? Because I remember being that young founder in my 20s, starting out, and like I was convinced that I probably shouldn't be the CEO because I was like, I don't have any experience and I didn't even study business. And so do you find yourself, given that the culture has changed a lot and there is a belief that founders can learn and grow and that bringing an external CEO is actually a very high risk move and a lot of times?
Very risky.
Yeah, usually when that happens, there's something completely wrong and you're trying to save the company, right? And so what is the advice that you give those early founders that are questioning themselves and doubting their capacity? Because it's very daunting when you're starting out, and you were pretty young when you started out. So what is the advice that you give them besides the moral support?
Yeah.
And how do you help them navigate that?
I think it's really hard to be a CEO, whether you're young or you're middle age or old. It's a lonely job, as you know, Brian. One of the reasons I started Pear was exactly that, right? How do you build? How can we invest in this founders? Many of them students, and help them become great CEOs. A lot of them comes from them. You have to be willing to learn, right? Because nobody is born a CEO. So the best, the advice I give them is you have to work on it and invest in yourself. If you want to keep running this company, when the company is 100 people, 1,000 people, several thousand people, it's a great sign from an early founder when I hear things like, hey, can you introduce me to 5 marketing people because I want to figure out how to do marketing for my company. Even if they're not going to do it and they're going to go hire somebody, that's a great sign for me. Another great sign is when people say, I'm looking for a coach. Can you help me find a coach? Which sounds crazy for a seed founder. But that's somebody that is investing, that realizes that in order to be a CEO, you have to grow. The people that think they're born CEOs, and whether they're 20 or 30 and don't invest in that, that's a bad sign. It doesn't, because it's a dynamic job. We're all learning in what we're doing.
It's a constant evolution, right? And the moment you think you've got it all figured out is when the universe has a way of reminding you that you don't know everything you think you know, right?
Totally. Any of us, right? You and me as well as an investor.
In every capacity. What made you want to become a startup investor? You started Pear about 10 years ago?
Yes. Well, it was not in my plans at all. My partner, Peshman Nozad, he was an angel investor in my companies, in 2 of my companies, my 2 later companies, and he was he had been an angel before. He came to me in 2009 and said, I want to start a fund, Mar. I want to do it with you. I'm going to rent a home. I'm going to fill it up with founders. We're going to serve them Persian tea, and then we'll just invest in the best ones. And I thought, oh my God, this man is insane, because I don't know why he wants to call me. I don't have any interest or anything. And for 4 years, he kept telling me, I found this home, come and see it. Finally, he changed his mind. He's like, forget the house. We'll just do some angel investing together. So we went to Coupa Cafe on University Avenue, which is, I think you may have been there, Brian. It's the iconic coffee shop. And I would go an hour a week, an hour a day. And ultimately, I was there the whole day. It's a great way to see founders, or at least at the time in 2013, when the center of the universe was still in the South Bay. It was after 4 months, like I said, I was there all the time. And I told him, okay, you win. We can go off and do this fund together. And then we, decided to raise Fund 1, which was really hard because neither of us came from venture. There were much fewer seed funds at the time, et cetera. Happy to talk about that as well.
Yeah. How much was Fund 1? How big was it?
Fund 1 was 50 million. Originally we set out to do 20. And then as soon as we had a couple of institutional investors, we thought, okay, I think we can we can raise a bigger fund. So that's, and it took us about almost 2 years to raise that fund. So for everybody that's trying to raise a fund, it's really hard.
Particularly right now, right?
Yeah. Fund 1 now, it's hard.
And you focus a lot on pre-seed and seed rounds, right? You've got a handful of IPOs under your belt. And I think, would you say DoorDash is the most kind of well-known investment that you made, or is there anything else that stands out in terms of your portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, definitely DoorDash if you're a consumer person. In biotech, we had a very successful IPO with Garden Health. So if you're in if you're a biotech investor, life sciences, you absolutely know Garden because it's one of the biggest successes in the last 5 years. And anyways, both are really good. We do have some great companies that, if the markets come back, will be great. One is Gusto on the SaaS side, and another one is Aurora in the climate / vertical SaaS sector. And, we have, we have a bunch of companies that are waiting in the wings to come out.
What are the signals that you most value when you're looking at those really early stage deals? Because everyone talks about, okay, obviously the team, but what are some things that stand out that if you look at kind of the opportunities that you've identified, what are some non-obvious things that you've been able to identify over the years?
I think I've been at this job for 10 years, and I think my opinion and taste has evolved over time. At the beginning, my partner Pejman was an angel investor, very focused on team. So there was a lot of team. And then, we focused a lot on market, and now it's very nuanced. I think when people say team, it's really how does the founder articulate the insight that they have about why embark in building that business, right? And it sounds like a really easy question, but just the way people talk about that and how focused, how clear on the end game they are, gives you the confidence to back them or not. The thing that you have to see is like when you have worked with folks like Tony at DoorDash or Josh at Gusto, and you have a barometer to compare other founders to, right? And it's very rare when people walk through your office and you're like, oh my gosh, they look like Tony. That's a very high bar, but they all have this common, this clear way to describe where they're going. Like it's obvious they're going to get there. It's very interesting.
Is that clarity? Is it crystal clear from the very beginning? Does it mean that the vision is always there and what changes is how they get there?
At least in my companies, that's 100% the case. The companies that have been successful, from day one, they could articulate the 10 billion, 20 billion story day one. And it's not easy. I'm not saying any of these companies, people think it's all great news on TechCrunch. And I think, as you know, inside a company, it's like 50 crises happen in order to get there, right? But the opportunity is very clear in their head. It's almost like they live in the future, and they've come here today to the present to tell you that this is going to happen, right? And it's very clear. I mean, I remember Helmi, our company Garden, they do liquid biopsy. So, you can take a blood test, and they can analyze that blood test and tell you what type of cancer you have, what treatment you should get. And at the time, it looked like science fiction, honestly. Like you could just take a blood test and do that. But it was very clear that was, his pitch was, I still remember he had like an analog TV and said, this is the way cancer test is today. This is the way it's going to be, in the future. Same with Tony. He went, I remember on a whiteboard explaining why the last mile was this big opportunity. It wasn't even about food. It was about last mile. And it's interesting. These people have it here early on.
Why was Tony and DoorDash able to out execute? Because you could look at that and be like, ridiculously competitive, right? So
no, they were not first.
Incredibly competitive, right? One of the most competitive
not
industries.
First until the last
and they weren't first, right?
Exactly. You want to be in position one last.
Yeah. It doesn't matter about being first. You want to be remaining, right? So what it is about Tony and DoorDash and the team there that in this such a competitive space?
DoorDash was primarily a tech company. I know it's hard to believe because these companies, as you know, they're ops companies. Every cent matters in that margin, right? I mean, the margins are just brutal, and its scale is complex, etc. If you want to run a massive operation like that, technology plays a really key part, right? And they were using data from day one to make their next move. The strategy was dictated around data. I mean, I think even if you look at even 2 years prior, 2.5 prior to going IPO, they were behind Uber Eats, right? And they looked at a lot of their customer data and realized, hey, we actually doesn't really matter if we deliver in 30 minutes. 42 minutes is what we have to do. Those 12 minutes make a huge difference if you're trying to deliver something to somebody, right? So they were able to relax that constraint, which was huge for them in actually making them successful. So I actually like that example because that really shows how it wasn't like a random strategic choice and that, set the success of this company. And at every point, everything is measured like that. The other thing is Tony and the team, they were super focused that, and clear about what metrics were successful. There's early on, I think founders are confused by fake metrics, whether it's GMV or, number of employees or number of restaurants in the platform. It doesn't matter. It's all about unit economics and, getting how time to profitability of a region. And if those are not top of mind day one, you lose, right? So for him, it was very clear. Even the first updates that they would send as a seed company, it was all numbers. When you get an update from a company and it's all words, bad sign. So like, give me the numbers and the right numbers, right? That's a sign that is going in the right direction.
So thank you for sharing that, Mar. Now I want to talk about just kind of the current state of affairs, right? At Pear, when you got together at the end of the year, or maybe you got together at the beginning of the year, or maybe this first quarter, how are you as a firm framing this year? What's changed for this year for you in terms of how you're investing? Talk a little bit more about the cadence of investing and maybe sector focus too.
Yeah, because I'm an engineer, I am fairly, I have kind of my frameworks, and they haven't changed that much in the last 10 years. Pejman and I, when we got started, I remember being in a car with Doug Leone and Pejman, and we asked him, what do you think about this downturn? It was like a quarter in 2016, the first quarter of 2016. It was like a 3-month hiatus, and the market went down, and everybody thought it was over. And I remember Doug saying, "Oh, it's all about unit economics. Good companies with good unit economics still raise in bad times, right?" And I think that's really the most important thing for us as an industry. If you can get that equation right early on, you succeed. So I've been like that all the time, whether it was easy to raise money or hard to raise money, right? I think money over 2020 and 21, it was easy to get. So even if you did not have the right fundamentals, you could raise a lot of money. Right now we're back to, hey, you actually have to have the right fundamentals to raise that money, which makes the conclusion of that is that there's less noise, right? So companies that are out there and are getting their Series A's and their Series B, they're really good companies, right? At the seed, as you know, there's still a lot of noise and multiple players playing on it, etc. And there's almost two parallel universe. You are either a generative AI company, at least today, may change in a week, but you're a generative AI company or you're not. If you are not, then you're going to be scrutinized a little more heavily. If you're a generative AI company, at least now, and I'm already beginning to hear noises that it won't last for a long time, it's hyped up the same way it was crypto and fintech and whatnot a year and a half ago. I am not a sector-specific investor, although we have specialists at Pear that cover various sectors. So I see a bunch of companies, and I'm always just looking at what's the customer value, what's the ROI that we're giving. And I like the challenge of going from industry to industry and trying to figure out if there's an opportunity somewhere.
The whole topic of AI, there's a lot of products that are kind of like wrappers of existing platforms. You mentioned that there's a lot of hype right now. Give me a sense of, like, you'd mentioned crypto as like a comparison. How does this stack up in terms of this next kind of evolution in the next phase? How big do you think it is? How does this play out in your mind?
I do think generative AI is kind of like web technology or mobile or cloud. You wouldn't start a company today and that doesn't have your engineering team take advantage of generative AI. You wouldn't. It would be stupid for you to do that. And even if you're an established company, you should go to your engineering team and tell them, how are we adopting this technology and changing our product? It just doesn't, it's going to be as fundamental, right? It's not something that's happened it feels like it just happened in the last 6 months, but AI has been, for decades, and over the last 10 years, and especially the last 5 years, significant advances. And, companies like Google have been using AI in products that you're using every day, whether, it's Google Translate or, your email, the way they end your email messages, et cetera. I mean, it's just everywhere. So, now it's accessible to the masses, and you can very quickly, like you say, wrap around something around it. Even, we actually hosted a hackathon last weekend, and our team, our team submitted an application for wrote an app in like a day. That was a dieting app. I was like, oh my, suggest menus and where to buy them. And it's impressive, right? It's actually really impressive that you can spin off these things really quickly. And I do believe that a lot of software will get rewritten taking advantage of this technology, right? I think you've probably seen a lot of companies in education or sales. So many companies trying to replace outreach and sales off all of the pre-sales, because, hey, you don't really need people to write manual emails. You can actually, use AI to do a pretty good job at doing that. Anyways, I think at the end, who is going to win at the application layer is going to be workflow. Who knows the customer really well? The AI is going to be a component of it. That's going to be one side. The second is who gets access to more data earlier on so that they can have better AI inside their product. So those two things will determine who wins. But it's going to be really tough because there's going to be many companies trying to reinvent every sector that we have. So that's one. I like the comparison to crypto only in the type of companies. I think if you have crypto, we had the protocols, which is kind of the bottom layer where there were the super wins, then there were the middle layer people, and then the top layer. And it's kind of the same here. We have the open AIs, then we have the infrastructure companies, mid-layer companies, APIs, or, evaluating LLMs or whatnot. And then we have the application. And the bottom ones require a lot of money and a lot of smart people, et cetera. So there's few of them and really, really big. And at the top, it's easy. And there's a lot of companies. So same thing. The big difference is that the market, there's more people ready to use products created with generative AI, that there were people ready to, become a DAO or buy NFTs or, start paying with cryptocurrencies, right? So there's more market for AI, at least today. We don't have to wait for it. It's here.
Do you think it's also because of the ease of understanding, like from the consumer standpoint of like,
yeah,
you go in
absolutely.
And so that facilitates the adoption?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, my partner told me he uses ChatGPT for every day. He loves it. It's like a game, and ask questions, and it's like $20 in your pocket. It's amazing, right? That and him and a bunch of consumers, right? It's pretty. However, if you wanted to have a wallet, oh my God, almost you needed to go get a tutorial or get somebody to teach you. So the barrier is very low.
Yeah, that increases adoption. And then in terms of
there's a market.
Yeah, exactly. So does that, in your mind, does that signal the size of the impact of the technology if you were to compare the two?
Yeah. And you're not buying AI as a consumer. You're just buying some product that uses AI to do something you want to do better, or a business, right? You're only selling AI to companies that may use AI. But the market, so that's why I think there's going to be a lot of innovation in trying to understand how to come up with novel products that take advantage of AI at its core. And we're in round one or round zero. We're still not there, right? I mean, think of mobile. It took, if you think a company like Uber or DoorDash, it was years after people had a phone in their pocket that they really came out, right? And took advantage of that. Anyways.
No, I like it. I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, let's talk a little bit. I know that you're not specialized in Latin America, but I'd love to get your sense. What have you seen? Talk about some of the investments. Have you made any investments in the region? What are the opportunities that you see?
We've made several investments in the region. I think the founders are really good. We have amazing, high quality CEOs. Some of the companies I think we share, you and I, we have Frubana and Melon. I think, the companies that have been backed and then we have backed in LATAM are typically similar to that DoorDash. They were big markets, all big markets, high cost in operations, low margins. So we haven't invested in like cloud infrastructure company in the region, right? We would if we had the right talent working on that there. It's just I haven't seen those pitches come to my desk necessarily, right? We don't have a fintech investment there, although I think there's been lots of great I'm sure you do great fintech investments in the region. I'm generally very optimistic, although I do believe it's going to be harder for LATAM companies to raise money over the next couple of years. It's just going to be harder because you're going to pay a penalty for not being here in the U.S. The market opportunity is still there, right? And the thesis that a bunch of the investors that started investing over the last 3 years, they're still valid. There's high adoption of technology, growing middle class, et cetera, is still there.
So having said that, and knowing that as a pre-seed or seed investor, you're expecting multiple cycles, right? Like, this is a cycle that we're in. Wouldn't that kind of mean that the current time to invest right now, pricing will be compressed and probably you'll have some of the best returns in this current kind of market? What do you think it takes for investors to be counter-cyclical in that way? There's some pullback out of the region in some places. I wouldn't say it's a massive pullback. I'd say at the growth stage, you're seeing it more. But even at the early stage, there's like some firms are less active because they're kind of like tentative now because of the current. But why wouldn't that increase the interest? I'll just ask in Pear's example. I don't know how you're thinking about the region. I know that it's not the core focus, but you've already made some investments. But having described what you just did, wouldn't that mean that the opportunities are kind of more attractive now?
I think in general, not even LATAM, there's a lot of great opportunities now. Okay, the companies are better, the founders are better. It's just better in ingredients. Okay, the only thing that is harder is raising your next round, right, or your next round. The Series B folks are being completely beaten down. I've actually read Tomas just put data on the decrease in number of rounds at various stages. And I think the numbers for Series Bs are 88%. 88% reduction. It's a huge number if you think about it, right? That means you used to be doing 10 and now you're only doing 1 Series B. It's crazy.
So is that volume of deals or
volume
capital?
Volume of deals. I think capital in general.
So that kind of fell off a cliff then.
There's no Series Bs, basically, right? Compared to where we were in 2021. That affects everybody, not just LATAM, right? So I think for investing in seed, it's great. Let's get in now. You still have 2 years of life. And then you're saying it's likely, nobody knows really, but people think, hey, it's likely that in 2 years things are better, right? But you need to be very careful how you run that company. I still see a lot of founders that said, oh, I was XYZ at Uber or at Rappi. And they've learned how to run companies in those years, which meant grow at all costs. Doesn't really matter when we'll hit a certain margin. And I still, even today, get founders that have that mentality. And I have to tell them, okay, we can build this company today, but you can't build it using that mentality. We have to build it using a different mentality. So when it's time to raise the next round, we're going to, we maximize our chances of getting to that money. It's just, an adjustment on how you run that company, knowing your constraints. There are different constraints that people have. That's all. But the opportunity is there, of course.
Yeah, I think it might be harder maybe given that Series B, like as a seed firm, I guess you have the advantage that you can let the cycle happen, because if you're investing kind of for the 18 to 24 months of runway, one, there's probably more, like the further you go down the stack, the downstream, there's less investing. So I'd say seed was affected less, but still affected. Series A affected more than seed, and then Series B, you mentioned an 88% astounding number. So I guess that the advantage you have is that you have more time to let the cycle go through, right?
Correct. You have more time, but you have to be aware of where are you in the macro cycle, right? So you spend that money the right way. That's all you have to do.
Yeah, you got to make sure you stretch it. Well, let me ask you something, because if I recall, Pear developed kind of a program for like pre-seed where you kind of almost, I wouldn't call it incubating, but like you had like really early, and I know a lot of VCs have different programs like that. Is there a name for the program that you have? And then tell us about how that started, and how do you serve the founders at the earliest days when they're like in ideation and they're trying to figure out what they want to build?
Yeah, our program is called Pear X. We've been running it for 10 years. We started it a little bit organically. We do a lot of work with universities, and a few students told us, oh, we want to spend the summer here. Can we do it? This is back in 2014. And we said, sure, you can spend the summer with us. So we run it for about 3 years in a fairly casual manner with a small number of students. And then we realized, lots of good companies are coming out of this. Maybe this should be part of our strategy. So then we officially, invested more time in it and made investments, et cetera. And now is core to what we do. We actually, every pre-seed investment that we do at Pear goes through Pear X. So the reason why is because we realized that almost Pear X is a way to onboard founders into startup land. And there's basic knowledge that we want to communicate to everybody, whether it's how to, create a dashboard for your company that matters, or reach out to customers, or talk or create updates, whatever. We do that as part of Pear X. We're also, I think, we're also very focused on working with founders to do customer development. I teach at Stanford a class just on that, doing customer development, which is really important, right? I mean, some people may start a company because they've worked somewhere for 10 years and they understand a problem really well. And some founders have less knowledge of what they're solving on, and more customer development is necessary. But in any case, I think knowing your customer is the most important thing you can do as an early stage founder. So we spend a lot of time doing that. And the program has been really successful. Even the last cohort, 90, I think maybe 100%, but at least 90% of them will raise a real seed round with lead investors, et cetera. So I want to say that we have product market fit on Pear X.
That's awesome. I want to maybe double click on that in a second, but I'm curious to hear more about the class that you teach. If you were to synthesize down, give us the cliff notes. Talking to customers is super important. But if you could go maybe a layer deeper on that in terms of what are the fundamental things that are takeaways Give us the 2-paragraph class on what you cover.
Summary.
Yes.
Okay. The class forces you to, at the end of the class, this is a 10-week class, Stanford's on the quarter system, you will have done about 120 customer interviews. Okay. And you start the class every week, you're supposed to do at least 12 interviews, which is not easy. Okay. And at the beginning, maybe you're just talking to people, but very quickly we want the experiment to be more and more real. So we force you to, build experiments. Could be a landing page or could be a real MVP, and present it to a customer and get their feedback. We're not trying to build an accelerator that creates companies. We're only trying to teach students, can you figure out how to confirm that you should actually, in fact, build this company, right? Do you have enough data that supports you going to build this company? And, at the beginning, let's assume, I don't know, I'm trying to sell you software, for you're a real estate broker and I'm trying to sell you some software. Maybe I'll interview 10 of them. Eventually, maybe I'll put in the middle of the class, maybe we'll say, okay, let's run some ads and put some landing page. And at the end of the class, build some prototype on Bubble or on something that we can get people to run and, give us some money for. And it sounds crazy that you come to the class with nothing, because you'll have to come with nothing. If you have an idea, you're almost not qualified to take the class. At the end, almost all the teams, and there's 8 teams, 5 people each, will come up with something. I tell students that we're teaching them how to work that brain muscle of rapid iteration by taking customer input into account. And every year there's anywhere from 1 to 3 teams that will go end up and start a company. And some people find out that this is not for them. The uncertainty of actually interviewing people and not knowing very clearly whether they should or should not build this is too much for them. So I think that's also a success for the class.
Yeah, I guess identifying what you don't want to spend your time on is an important win, I guess.
It's hard.
It's hard. Of the people that decide to go do it, what are the characteristics that you see? What are the qualities, if you were to describe those standouts that are just I have to keep doing this? Is it that they found a problem that they love, or is it they're just built to want to solve problems?
I think it's a combination. It's hard to separate one from the other. A lot of folks, especially at Stanford, they come in with, I'm going to start a company. That's the reason they choose the school if they had options. So it's in it, this is my life mission. I'm going to go do it, right? But we also have teams that are PhD students that have never thought about startups, and they end up building companies. One of the teams we had maybe 4 years ago is a company called Beacons AI, which is actually selling to creators a way to have a little profile. But these guys were PhD students, and they came into the class with an idea for, a new ringer for your house, and a smart camera. They came in with a hardware prototype. So it had nothing to do with what they're building today. But them having exposure to what does it mean to build a product, why having a customer is important, why is it not all about you having the smartest camera in the world, but who actually cares about it, was really game-changing for them. So anyways, it's different for me that the teaching the class is having an impact in all these students. I have to wear a hat of an educator. And if you can have impact on these students, that goes a long way.
What do you think the role of academia and research, how does that play into improving the way we develop and grow startups all over the world? Obviously, you're providing a lot of information. You're hopefully shortening the process for these potential founders. But what other roles do you think play in this kind of academia world?
Well, there's 2 types, I guess, of research. One is the research technical research or biotech research, AI research, even my own first company. All of that research obviously creates companies. Now, when you're a PhD student and you're doing that type of research or professor, the most important thing you have to be is not enamored with your technology. But again, it's a customer that matters. It's the customer who cares about your technology. And is that a big enough problem, right? And if you're just in a lab you have never even heard the word customer. So, learning about that is actually a good thing. If you are an MBA student or an undergrad doing business and you're taking entrepreneurship classes, honestly, I think they all sound great. It's only practice that gets you there. That's why I think my class is very practical. You really have to be there. There's very few lectures. Students are talking back to you. They have to get out of the building and build things. Sitting in a lecture for entrepreneurship it's interesting as a seminar, but it doesn't necessarily make you or teach you the hard lessons, right? So it's a different. They have to be more practical on the entrepreneurial side, I would say. But it's important, I wish I had taken some classes before I started my first company.
Yeah, it sounds like you didn't have the same framework that you have now and the same skill set that I'm sure you're teaching, and then I'm sure you're introducing a lot of this Pear X too. Talk to me about how you source candidates. How do you decide who you're going to work with? Describe the terms and the partnership, just to kind of get a better idea of that.
I think I mentioned about half of what we do comes from universities. So I'm very close to academia. And there are great founders. Stanford is literally a few hundred feet from my office. But we spend time in other schools, Berkeley, Harvard, MIT, CMU, many schools. A lot of our investments also come from not students, right? And, when you've been in the business for 10 years, you have natural deal flow that comes your way if you're a good player. So luckily we have a lot of that, and it gets better every time. It's a vicious circle. If you do good, better things happen, et cetera, right? And then we have a big team. Pear is now 25 people. So I feel like there's deal overflow even in these days. So that's one. The terms for pre-seed is anything under $2 million. So we will give up to $2 million. We are ownership driven. We want to own 10% of those companies at least. And the reason behind that, it's just venture math. We're going to put in a lot of time. I say that getting money from Pear is like flying first class. You get so many resources. We've built this incredible recruiting team, super senior. My partner, Matt, runs it. He was head of global talent at Instacart and had worked with a bunch of very successful startups prior. And we have recruiters from Uber, Brex, Facebook, et cetera, here, SpaceX. It's crazy. And, a company, we want to put that at the hands of our company. We commit to finding your first 3 engineers. It's a huge effort. But because we're doing all of that, we really, we don't invest in that many companies, and we need to, have significant stakes.
Is the price vary based on the experience of the founder? You mentioned up to $2 million, so I assume the valuation fluctuates, and it's not like a fixed offer.
It's not fixed. Yeah, it depends on a variety of things, experience, but also how far along they are in the process. Some people may come to Pear X with literally no idea or the wrong idea. And that's okay. We will do a non-trivial percentage of them will be in that category. And then we have people that are fairly far along, right? So it depends on where you are in the idea process, in that seed process.
And if you describe the recruiting as one of the services, what other kind of services do you provide? First of all, like giving an early stage founder $1 to $2 million, it's a
great service.
Yeah, I'm sure they all appreciate that. But beyond that, it sounds like you're carving yourself out as part of this like strategic partner, a quasi co-founder in some ways. What other services do you provide?
I think there's 2 types of help for a company, right? One is strategic, and the other one is more tactical. So strategic, I think it's hard to scale. You have to sit down with the founder, and you do it, I do it, any kind of investor will do it about, we're strategizing about, is this the right product? Is the right pricing? Is this, should we go after this customer initially or that other customer? Those are strategic discussions at the board level. You can influence a little bit how we collect data to make those decisions. But those are our partners. Our investment team does that. And we have a big team. I think you can run a seed fund in many ways. You could do small team, tons of investments, or small team, a few investments. We are, we have 12 folks in the investment team and do 25 companies a year. So that's 2 companies per person. It's very high class, I would say. So that's strategic. And then tactical, I think for our teams, for our seed, there's, I think, 3 things we can do. One is recruiting. The second one is help them on the BD and go to market. And that has many legs to that stool. You can teach them with marketing, introduction, sales, etc. My partner Pepe runs that. And we have several people in our team that help with that. Jill, our marketing partner, and anyways, other folks here. And then the last one, which is really important also, but I consider it more tactical, is how do you get your next round of financing? So at Pear, we have a Series A, what I call a Series A bootcamp, which is how do we really train, it's like a 3 to 4 week thing. But I believe you can teach founders how to be better fundraisers, both at the Series A and Series B, slightly different requirements. And, I'm actually very involved in that because I like it. but we have a design team and again, engineering that helps with, the order of, who we go after, et cetera.
So it sounds like recruiting, go-to-market, fundraising are like the kind of three main areas of focus.
But I think the most important is really your strategic time you spend with the founder. That is the most important, most impactful at the end of the day, But those are services that we provide to accelerate it.
Talk to me about how many funds have you raised, just to get an idea, because that's a lot of services to provide. Not many seed funds are able to have the bandwidth to do that because you must have raised significant capital over the years.
Yeah, we've, I can't, as you know, we have SEC doesn't allow us to talk about things that we haven't announced. There's a Form D on our Fund 4, and you'll get news soon.
Okay.
But prior to Fund 4, we've raised Fund 3, which was 160, Fund 2, which was 75, and Fund 1, which was 50.
Okay.
I think we're, with Fund 4, will be one of the largest seed funds in the U.S.
Okay.
And I guess the rest of the world by default. And again, we are not a small firm. We're a bigger firm. We have specialists in biotech and healthcare and fintech, SaaS, et cetera. So it's run really as a, multiple business units within the Pear style.
And geographically speaking, it sounds like the DNA of the organization is very like university centric, and you've been able to. It helps that you're a professor there and that you've got a lot of connections there. Do you have like a strong bias for just like your backyard? Has the organization kind of evolved in terms of geography and how does LATAM play in that? Is there any earmark capital that you think about, or is it just opportunistic?
It's very, okay. So the DNA started with, Pejman, my partner's Pejman Deal Flow. So it wasn't really university. We've done a lot of university, but we have a very strong non-university side of our portfolio. More than half is non-university. So this is sometimes a kind of misconception about Pear, although we're really good at the university. We don't earmark money for a specific vertical or for a specific geography. It's really, it's even hard to do that. If you had earmarked AI money a year ago, it would be completely off, right? So it's just really hard because cycles are so fast. LATAM, our deal, the way we started investing in LATAM was a lot of students that had come from LATAM and we met them here and then they went back, right? But once we did that, then those founders started sending us their friends. So now we have the next generation of folks there that are, not, had worked at Rappi or Google in the region or whatnot. They're not necessarily the people we met here.
I always said that years ago, I said, if someone had started a Stanford fund, GSB fund, David Vélez, Gabrielle from Quinto, there's a long list of very talented founders that have come out of Stanford. So well, listen, Mar, we hope that you frequent the LATAM scene more. I'm glad that we've been able to co-invest on a handful of things with the Latitud. I think some of the deals I did as an angel before we had a fund, and now an early stage fund set up. But we're very, it's run by Thomas Roggio from from our team. And we're very collaborative, right? We're kind of Switzerland.
Yes.
So we co-invest because it's a small fund and small checks. So I hope that we can look at more opportunities together and to have you more involved. And thank you for sharing some of your insights.
Absolutely. I love working with you, Brian. So let's do more stuff together.
Gracias.
We're still active. We're still active in LATAM. So call me.
Okay, eso. Estamos juntos. Thank you so much.
Okay, gracias.
Bueno, vamos
Bye.
LATAM. Ciao, ciao.